Have you ever wondered what could make an ordinary rifle capable of achieving the impossible? What if I told you that deep in the Arizona desert, military investigators uncovered a weapon that defied all explanation? A modified hunting rifle that somehow brought down 3 military aircraft in just 48 hours. The story I'm about to share with you has been buried in classified documents for decades, and the truth behind it might challenge everything you thought you knew about modern warfare and ancient spiritual practices. Before we continue, tell us in the comments where you're watching from, and make sure to subscribe to help our channel continue bringing these hidden pieces of American history to light. Your support allows us to uncover these remarkable stories that would otherwise remain in shadow. The summer of 1973 marked one of the strangest and most classified incidents in American military history. In the sprawling Navajo Nation reservation that stretches across Arizona, New Mexico, and Utah, a series of unexplainable aircraft downings triggered a top-secret investigation that would leave even the most skeptical military analysts questioning reality. It began on July 17th, when radar operators at Davis-Monthan Air Force Base near Tucson lost contact with an F-4 Phantom jet during a routine training exercise over the northeastern Arizona desert. Initial reports indicated mechanical failure, a common enough occurrence to avoid raising significant alarm. The wreckage was located within hours, scattered across a remote mesa approximately 30 miles from Tuba City. What puzzled investigators was the strange, perfect circular hole through the aircraft's titanium engine housing, a penetration that no conventional bullet should have been capable of creating. The damage pattern doesn't conform to any ballistic profile in our database, noted Air Force Captain James Whitfield in his preliminary report. The entry point suggests a projectile traveling at velocities we typically associate with advanced weapons systems, not small arms fire. Before analysts could complete their investigation, a second aircraft, this time a Bell UH-1 Huey helicopter transporting supplies to a geological survey team, went down in approximately the same region just 26 hours later. Again, the wreckage revealed an identical circular perforation through critical mechanical components. By this point, military police and FBI agents had established a perimeter around a 50-square-mile area of the reservation, citing unspecified security concerns. Agent Robert Tallman of the FBI's Phoenix office, himself of Navajo descent, was assigned as liaison between federal investigators and tribal authorities. His field notes, partially declassified in 2004 under the Freedom of Information Act, provide the first glimpse into what was becoming an increasingly bizarre case. Local witnesses report seeing an elderly man moving through the canyons in the vicinity of both crash sites, Tallman wrote. Description matches Thomas Begay, 73 years old, former code talker during World War II, and something of a recluse, according to community members. Tribal police indicate he's lived alone in a traditional hogan since his wife's passing 15 years ago. What happened next would transform a curious investigation into something that would haunt military archives for decades. On the morning of July 19th, just 48 hours after the first incident, a third aircraft, an A-7 Corsair on a low-altitude training run, plummeted from the sky. The crash site was less than 5 miles from the previous 2 locations. By sunset, a joint task force had surrounded a small, traditional Navajo dwelling nestled between 2 towering sandstone formations. Inside, they found Thomas Begay, a decorated war veteran who had served with distinction as one of the famed Navajo code talkers during the Pacific Campaign. Beside him stood a weathered Winchester Model 70 rifle, modified in ways that immediately confounded the tactical team. Subject surrendered without resistance, reported Lieutenant Colonel William Hayes of Air Force Special Investigations. When questioned about the downed aircraft, he simply stated, "The sky has been too noisy. The ancestors cannot rest." The rifle was immediately confiscated and transported under heavy guard to Kirtland Air Force Base in New Mexico, where a specialized team of ballistics experts and engineers began what would become one of the most unusual forensic examinations in military history. The Winchester Model 70 was a common enough hunting rifle, first produced in 1936 and favored for its accuracy and reliability. But Begay's weapon had been extensively modified in ways that defied conventional gunsmithing. The barrel had been replaced with one of unknown composition, a material that preliminary tests suggested was not entirely metallic. The stock had been intricately carved with symbols consistent with traditional Navajo spiritual iconography, and the firing mechanism had been altered in ways that the examining technicians could not immediately understand. Initial assessment indicates significant modifications to the firing pin and chamber, noted Dr. Eleanor Reeves, lead engineer assigned to the examination. The barrel material contains trace elements not consistent with any known alloy in our reference databases. Spectroscopic analysis is ongoing, but it was what they discovered inside the barrel that would cause the greatest consternation. Embedded within the rifling were microscopic crystals that appeared to be fragments of turquoise, a stone sacred to the Navajo people and central to many of their healing and spiritual practices. Interspersed among these were particles of another substance, one that preliminary analysis could not identify through conventional means. While the technical team continued their examination, intelligence officers began the process of interviewing Begay. The transcripts of these interviews, heavily redacted in the files that have been declassified, paint a picture of an increasingly frustrated interrogation. "I told them nothing that wasn't already in the wind," Begay later recounted to his nephew, Michael Yazzie, in a conversation that was surreptitiously recorded by surveillance equipment in the detention facility where he was being held. "The old ways don't need explaining to those who won't understand. The rifle speaks to the metal birds, because I asked it to. The stones remember what they were before they were stones." The investigation took an even stranger turn when Dr. Reeves and her team attempted to test-fire the weapon under controlled conditions at Kirtland's underground range. According to her report, filed on July 23rd, the rifle refused to fire when aimed at conventional targets. However, when directed at a decommissioned drone aircraft suspended from the ceiling of the facility, the weapon discharged with a sound that multiple witnesses described as unlike any gunshot we've ever heard. More like a whisper followed by thunder. The projectile, traveling at what tracking equipment measured as nearly 3 times the velocity that should have been possible from the rifle's ammunition, created the same perfect circular hole through the drone's aluminum fuselage that had been observed in the downed aircraft. "We cannot explain the acceleration mechanism," Dr. Reeves noted. "The powder charge in the ammunition is standard. The projectile itself is a conventional copper-jacketed lead round. Yet something is happening during the firing process that violates our understanding of ballistic physics." Further examination of the rifle's interior revealed something even more inexplicable. Using specialized imaging equipment, technicians discovered a series of microscopic etchings along the interior of the barrel. Etchings that formed patterns identical to certain petroglyphs found in ancient Anasazi ruins throughout the Four Corners region. These patterns, according to Dr. William Rosen, an archaeologist consulted on the case, appeared to represent star constellations as they would have appeared over the American Southwest approximately 1,000 years ago. The precision of these etchings is beyond what could be achieved with conventional tools, Dr. Rosen noted in his assessment. "We're talking about patterns carved at a scale that would require electron microscope guidance. And yet the rifle itself dates to no earlier than the 1950s, based on its serial number." As the technical investigation continued to yield more questions than answers, the intelligence team's interviews with Begay reached an impasse. The elderly code talker maintained that he had modified the rifle using techniques taught to him by his grandfather, who had in turn learned them from generations before. "The metal remembers where it came from," Begay reportedly told his interrogators. All things remember. The turquoise remembers the sky it once was. The steel remembers the earth it came from. I only reminded them how to speak to each other. When pressed on how a modified hunting rifle could possibly down aircraft flying at hundreds of miles per hour, Begay's response was cryptically recorded in the files as, "The bullet doesn't need to catch the bird. It only needs to call the bird to it." By July 25th, the case had drawn the attention of officials at the highest levels of military intelligence. A team from a specialized division of the Defense Advanced Research Projects Agency, DARPA, arrived at Kirtland to take custody of the rifle and all associated research materials. Their arrival coincided with a strange electrical disturbance that knocked out power to portions of the base for nearly 6 hours and corrupted many of the digital records associated with Dr. Reeves's testing. The DARPA team, led by Dr. Jonathan Weiss, established a new secure facility within Kirtland, where examination of the rifle continued under heightened security protocols. Access to this facility was restricted to those with cosmic top-secret clearance, a classification level above even that required for nuclear weapons development. What happened within this facility over the next 3 weeks remains largely classified. However, fragments of information have emerged through various declassification requests and the testimonies of peripheral personnel involved in the operation. Dr. Marcus Chen, a materials scientist who was briefly consulted on the analysis of the barrel composition, later noted in his personal journal, which was discovered after his death in 1991 and subsequently published by his daughter, they asked me to identify an alloy that shouldn't exist. The molecular structure displayed properties consistent with metamaterials that we've only theorized about, substances capable of manipulating electromagnetic fields in ways that conventional materials cannot. When I suggested that such a material was beyond our current manufacturing capabilities, the project lead simply said, "That's the conclusion we're trying to avoid." Meanwhile, Thomas Begay remained in custody, classified as a consultant rather than a detainee, a designation that allowed authorities to hold him without formal charges. His health, already fragile due to his advanced age, began to deteriorate under the stress of confinement and constant questioning. On August 7th, during what was supposed to be a routine interview session, Begay reportedly began chanting in Navajo. The recording equipment in the interview room malfunctioned, but security personnel outside reported hearing a sound like distant thunder despite the clear skies. When they entered the room, they found Begay unconscious and the 2 interviewers in a state of confusion, unable to recall the preceding 15 minutes of conversation. Medical personnel were called, and Begay was transported to the base hospital where he was diagnosed with pneumonia and placed under treatment. During his hospitalization, he was kept under constant guard, with all conversations recorded and all medical procedures observed by security personnel. It was during this hospital stay that one of the most significant breakthroughs in the case occurred. According to nursing notes entered into Begay's medical chart, he awoke from a fevered sleep on the night of August 9th and began speaking rapidly in a mixture of English and Navajo. The night nurse, Lieutenant Sarah Martinez, transcribed what she could understand. "The stones are singing again. They remember when they were stars. The old ones taught us how to listen. The metal birds don't belong in their path. I didn't want to hurt anyone. I only wanted quiet for the ceremonies. The rifle doesn't kill. It only reminds things where they belong, the earth or the sky." When Dr. Weiss was informed of these statements, he immediately ordered a more detailed analysis of the turquoise fragments found within the rifle barrel. This analysis, conducted using equipment specially brought in from Los Alamos National Laboratory, revealed something astonishing. The crystalline structure of the turquoise had been altered at a quantum level, creating what one physicist described as microscopic lattices that theoretically could function as quantum resonators. In layman's terms, the stones had been somehow modified to amplify certain frequencies, frequencies that, according to Dr. Weiss's hastily assembled theory, might correspond to the resonant frequencies of specific alloys used in aircraft construction. The implication was staggering. The rifle might not be firing projectiles with impossible velocity, but rather firing normal bullets that had been entangled with their targets at a quantum level, creating points of catastrophic structural failure upon impact. This theory, while speculative and far beyond the acknowledged scientific understanding of the time, was taken seriously enough that on August 12th, all turquoise jewelry was temporarily banned from secure areas of Kirtland Air Force Base. By mid-August, Thomas Begay's health had deteriorated to the point where military doctors recommended his release to his family. This recommendation coincided with a memo from Dr. Weiss to his superiors suggesting that the rifle's unique properties appeared to be inextricably linked to Begay himself, that without his specific handling and preparation, the weapon functioned as nothing more than a conventional, if well-crafted, hunting rifle. On August 19th, Begay was released to the custody of his nephew, Michael Yazzie, under strict conditions. He was forbidden from discussing his detention or the rifle with anyone, was required to check in weekly with Agent Tallman, and was prohibited from possessing any firearms or entering any gunsmithing facility. The rifle itself remained at the secure facility at Kirtland, now officially classified under a special access program codenamed Sky Stone. Begay returned to his traditional hogan on the reservation, where his health gradually improved under the care of his family and a traditional Navajo healer. Military intelligence maintained surveillance on his residence for several months, but no unusual activities were reported. The file notes that he resumed his normal patterns of life, tending to his small herd of sheep, participating in community ceremonies, and occasionally visiting the trading post in Tuba City for supplies. The rifle, meanwhile, continued to confound researchers at Kirtland. Despite extensive testing, they could not replicate the effect observed during the initial test firing. The weapon performed ballistically like any other Winchester Model 70, with no unusual velocities or impact patterns. The mysterious properties that had allowed it to bring down 3 aircraft seemed to have vanished. Dr. Weiss, in his final report on Project Sky Stone, dated November 3, 1973, concluded, "The anomalous properties observed in the subject weapon appear to be transient and contextual rather than inherent to its physical construction. While we have identified several unusual modifications and materials, none of these in isolation or combination explain the observed effects. It is the recommendation of this office that the investigation transition from a technical analysis to a broader study of Navajo traditional knowledge as it pertains to material manipulation and quantum entanglement concepts." This recommendation was apparently not well received. A handwritten note on the report, initialed by someone identified only as MC, reads, "Denied. Project to be terminated. All materials to be secured at S4 facility. No further contact with subject Begay." By December 1973, all active investigation into the incident had ceased. The 3 aircraft downings were officially attributed to mechanical failure in records accessible to the public. The rifle was transported to an undisclosed location, believed by some researchers to be a specialized storage facility in Nevada, known colloquially as S4. Thomas Begay lived quietly on the reservation for another 7 years, passing away peacefully in his sleep in 1980. His funeral was attended by family, community members, and, according to sign-in records at the funeral home in Tuba City, 2 unidentified men in military uniforms who left immediately after the service. The case might have remained completely buried were it not for the persistence of Agent Robert Tallman, who had maintained an unofficial interest in the matter long after his official duties had ended. Following his retirement from the FBI in 1990, Tallman began filing Freedom of Information Act requests for documents related to the incident, citing his former involvement as justification for access. Most of these requests were denied on national security grounds, but a few documents, heavily redacted, were released over the years. These fragments, combined with interviews Tolman conducted with peripheral figures involved in the case, formed the basis for a manuscript he completed shortly before his death in 2002. This unpublished work, titled The Singing Stones, Technology and Tradition in the American Southwest, was found among his personal effects and has circulated in limited form among researchers interested in classified military projects. In 2007, during renovation work at Kirtland Air Force Base, construction workers uncovered a sealed container in a wall space of a building scheduled for demolition. The container, according to unverified reports from one of the workers, held a single turquoise stone and a handwritten note in what appeared to be Navajo. Base security quickly confiscated these items, and all workers present were required to sign additional non-disclosure agreements. The story might have ended there, confined to the dusty archives of military intelligence and the whispered legends of the Navajo Nation. But in 2015, a routine declassification review at the National Archives turned up a collection of photographs taken during the original examination of Begay's rifle. These images, while technically unremarkable, contained metadata that had not been properly scrubbed. Data that indicated the photos had been taken with equipment that, according to official records, wouldn't be developed for another decade. This discrepancy caught the attention of Dr. Elena Sandoval, a physicist specializing in quantum optics at the University of Arizona. Her request to examine the original photographs was denied, but her subsequent paper, Temporal Anomalies in Classified Photography, Implications for Quantum Observation Theory, raised uncomfortable questions about the true nature of what had been discovered in that rifle barrel. The possibility exists, Dr. Sandoval wrote, that what was encountered was not merely an advanced technology, but a fundamentally different approach to physical manipulation, one that operates outside our current scientific paradigm. Traditional knowledge systems, particularly those developed in isolation over thousands of years, may contain insights into natural phenomena that our relatively young Western scientific tradition has yet to comprehend. The military has maintained its silence on the matter. No official acknowledgement of Project Skystone exists in publicly accessible records. The 3 aircraft incidents remain classified as accidents due to mechanical failure. Thomas Begay's military record makes no mention of his detention in 1973, noting only his honorable service as a code talker during World War II. But questions persist. In the decades since the incident, unusual modifications to hunting rifles have been occasionally reported throughout the Southwest, particularly in areas adjacent to the Navajo, Hopi, and Apache reservations. None have demonstrated the extraordinary capabilities attributed to Begay's weapon, but ballistics experts have noted unusual wear patterns and unexplained modifications that suggest attempts to replicate his work. More disturbing are the reports from pilots who train in the airspace over the Four Corners region. On rare occasions, usually during the solstices or equinoxes, electronic systems experience momentary failures. Radar shows phantom returns. Radio communications pick up snippets of voice transmissions that sound, according to one pilot's report, like someone speaking backward through water. For those who know where to look, the signs suggest that whatever Thomas Begay understood about the relationship between stone, metal, and sky didn't die with him. Throughout the mesas and canyons of the Navajo Nation, elders still teach the traditional songs and ceremonies. Young people still learn the proper way to handle turquoise, to respect its power and connection to the sky. And in small hogans and workshop sheds, far from prying eyes, the ancient knowledge continues to be applied to materials of the modern world. The rifle that brought down 3 aircraft may be locked away in some government vault, but the knowledge behind it remains alive in the whispered stories and careful teachings passed down through generations. It reminds us that there are forms of understanding that exist outside our textbooks and laboratories, ways of knowing that might seem impossible until Suddenly and dramatically, they manifest in the world with undeniable force. And perhaps most unsettling of all is the question that haunts those few who know the full story. Was Thomas Begay the only one who possessed this knowledge? Or are there others, even now, who know how to make the stones sing and the sky listen? In the years following Thomas Begay's death, the legend of the rifle that could call aircraft from the sky faded into the background of military folklore, a curious anomaly filed away alongside other unexplained phenomena. But beneath the surface, the investigation never truly ended. A small, unmarked office in the Pentagon, operating under the innocuous designation Advanced Materials Assessment Group, continued to analyze fragments of data from the original Sky Stone project. In 1986, this group received an unexpected catalyst for renewed interest. An F-16 fighter jet on a training mission over the Navajo Nation experienced a complete systems failure at 30,000 feet. The pilot, Captain Maria Rodriguez, managed to eject safely, but her subsequent report contained details that immediately triggered classified protocols established after the Begay incident. The aircraft didn't just fail, Rodriguez stated in her debriefing. It felt like something reached up and took hold of it. The metal actually hummed. I could feel it through my gloves. Then there was a sound like a bell being struck, and every electronic system went dead simultaneously. Before I ejected, I swear I saw the fuselage beginning to deform, as if the metal was trying to fold itself into some kind of pattern. The wreckage, when recovered, displayed the same distinctive circular perforation that had characterized the aircraft downed by Begay's rifle 13 years earlier. More disturbing still, metallurgical analysis revealed microscopic alterations to the aircraft's aluminum skin, changes that one analyst described as if the metal was trying to revert to some more primitive form. Pentagon officials immediately dispatched a specialized team to the Navajo Nation. Their cover story, an environmental assessment of potential contamination from the crashed aircraft, allowed them to interview residents in the vicinity of the incident. These interviews yielded a name: Gabriel Begay, Thomas Begay's great-nephew, a young man in his early 20s who had recently returned to the reservation after an unsuccessful attempt at college in Albuquerque. Surveillance was established on Gabriel's residence, a modern modular home on the outskirts of Tuba City. For weeks, observers noted nothing unusual in his behavior. He worked part-time at a gas station, visited family regularly, and occasionally went hunting in the canyons near his great-uncle's old property. There was no evidence of gunsmithing equipment or unusual materials being brought to his home. What the observers failed to notice, however, was what happened during the new moon of each month. On these nights, Gabriel would walk out into the desert, carrying only a small leather pouch, returning before dawn with the same pouch, now apparently heavier. It wasn't until October 1986 that investigators got their first real break. An unexpected autumn storm forced a surveillance team to seek shelter near the ruins of Thomas Begay's old hogan. While waiting out the downpour, they discovered a small opening in the ground behind where the traditional dwelling had stood, an entrance to what appeared to be a ceremonial kiva, a type of underground chamber usually associated with Pueblo peoples rather than the Navajo. The space showed evidence of recent use, noted Agent Daniel Blackwood in his report. Fresh ashes in the central fire pit, newly woven mats on the floor. But most significant were the items arranged on a small stone shelf carved into the eastern wall. A collection of turquoise stones in varying sizes, several spent rifle cartridges that had been carefully cut open and repacked with an unidentified substance, and a notebook containing what appeared to be a mixture of Navajo text and complex mathematical equations. The notebook was photographed page by page before being returned exactly as it had been found. The photographs were immediately transmitted to the Pentagon, where analysts made a startling discovery. The equations, though written in a non-standard notation, appeared to describe quantum entanglement principles and resonance frequencies, concepts that aligned with theoretical physics papers published nearly 2 decades after Thomas Begay had supposedly developed his modified rifle. These formulations are expressing quantum mechanical principles using a mathematical framework we don't recognize. Sanantur, Dr. Helen Montgomery of MIT observed when consulted on the images. It's as if someone developed an entirely different mathematical language to describe quantum phenomena, one that doesn't build on Schrödinger or Heisenberg, but arrives at similar conclusions through a completely different path. More disturbing was the analysis of linguists who examined the Navajo text accompanying the equations. This isn't contemporary Navajo, noted Dr. James Wilton of the American Indigenous Languages Institute. The syntax and certain lexical elements appear to be archaic forms not commonly used since before European contact. Some passages bear similarities to ritual language documented in certain healing ceremonies, but contain terms we've never encountered in any recorded Navajo text. By November 1986, a decision was made at the highest levels of military intelligence. Gabriel Begay would be approached directly, not as a suspect, but as a potential asset. The officer selected for this delicate task was Colonel Thomas Whitehawk, an Apache who had risen through military intelligence ranks while maintaining strong connections to his cultural heritage. The initial contact occurred on November 12th at the trading post in Tuba City, where Gabriel often stopped after his shift at the gas station. Colonel Whitehawk, dressed in civilian clothes but making no attempt to hide his military bearing, approached the young man as he browsed through a selection of tools. "I knew who he was before he said a word," Gabriel later recounted to his sister, in a conversation that was covertly recorded. The way he moved, the way he looked at things, not like a tourist or a regular white guy from the city. I figured he was either military or FBI. I almost walked out, but then he spoke to me in Apache. Just a greeting, and something about it made me decide to hear him out. The conversation that followed, conducted partly in English and partly in Navajo, which Whitehawk spoke with limited proficiency, was the beginning of what would become one of the most unusual collaborations in military research history. Colonel Whitehawk, acting under explicit instructions, laid out the government's knowledge of Thomas Begay's rifle and the recent F-16 incident. Rather than issuing threats or demands, he proposed an exchange. Gabriel's knowledge for access to advanced research facilities and the return of his great-uncle's rifle, which had remained in government custody for 13 years. "Your uncle found a way to make the old knowledge work, with new materials," Whitehawk reportedly told him. "We want to understand how, not to make weapons, though I won't lie to you and say there aren't those who would want that, but because it represents a scientific principle, we can't explain." Gabriel's response, according to Whitehawk's report, was unexpected. "It's not science, it's relationship. The stones and the metal and the sky all remember when they were part of the same thing. Before the world was separated into pieces, the old songs remind them how to speak to each other again. My uncle didn't invent anything. He just remembered what our people always knew." After several more meetings, an agreement was reached. Gabriel would work with a small team of researchers at a special facility established near Los Alamos, New Mexico. The work would be classified at the highest level, with only 5 individuals granted full access to the research. In return, he would receive his uncle's rifle, a substantial stipend, and a guarantee that any technological applications developed would require his approval. In January 1987, the Sky Stone project was officially reactivated under the new designation Sky Stone Die Tund. A specialized laboratory was constructed according to Gabriel's specifications, oriented to the cardinal directions, built with specific materials, and designed to allow natural light to enter through carefully positioned skylights. Standard research equipment was supplemented with items Gabriel requested: traditional weaving looms, ceramic firing kilns, and stone-grinding tools that would not have looked out of place in a museum of ancient southwestern cultures. For the first 6 months, progress reports from the facility indicated little that would satisfy conventional scientific expectations. Gabriel spent weeks preparing materials, grinding turquoise into fine powder, preparing mixtures of clay and mineral compounds, weaving intricate patterns on small looms. The military observers grew increasingly impatient, but Colonel Whitehawk counseled patience. "He's not being evasive," Whitehawk noted in his monthly assessment. "He's following a process that requires these preparations. It's like asking why a chemist needs to purify reagents before an experiment. These are his reagents, and the purification process just doesn't look like what we're used to." The breakthrough came in August 1987, when Gabriel announced he was ready to demonstrate the principles behind his uncle's work. In a carefully documented session, he assembled a simple apparatus, a small wooden frame supporting a tautly stretched deerskin membrane, covered with a thin layer of the turquoise powder he had spent months preparing. Nearby, he positioned a small block of aircraft-grade aluminum that had been provided by the research team. What happened next was captured by multiple cameras and sensors, yet defied conventional explanation. Gabriel began to sing, a low, rhythmic chant that gradually increased in complexity. As he sang, he struck the membrane with a small bone mallet in a precise pattern. The turquoise powder on the membrane began to arrange itself into geometric patterns, similar to the forms created by sand on a vibrating plate in cymatics experiments. After approximately 17 minutes, the aluminum block, positioned 3 feet away from the apparatus, began to visibly change. Its surface appeared to ripple, as if momentarily becoming liquid while retaining its overall shape. When the demonstration concluded, examination of the block revealed that its crystalline structure had been altered throughout, not just on the surface, but uniformly throughout its mass. The material has undergone a phase transition that should be impossible without extreme heat, noted Dr. Marcus Chen, who had been brought back into the project after his earlier involvement with Thomas Bigay's rifle. The molecular alignment has been completely reorganized, resulting in a 30% reduction in density and a corresponding increase in structural flexibility. In layman's terms, we've converted a block of aircraft aluminum into something closer to a metallic clay, and we did it at room temperature with sound waves and a bit of turquoise dust. This demonstration catalyzed a new intensity in the research. Over the next 18 months, Gabriel worked with the scientific team to document and analyze the techniques he had learned from his great-uncle. Progress was slow by conventional research standards. Each demonstration required extensive preparation and could only be performed under specific conditions related to solar and lunar cycles. But the results consistently defied conventional physical laws. Among the most significant discoveries was what the team termed material memory, the principle that, at a quantum level, all matter retains information about its previous states and relationships with other matter. The turquoise, according to Gabriel's explanation, served as a mediator that could access and activate this memory. "The stone remembers being sky," he explained during one recorded session. "The metal remembers being earth. When they speak to each other through the songs, they remember when they were not separate things." The scientific team developed a theoretical framework that attempted to explain these phenomena in terms of quantum entanglement and non-local communication between particles. While never fully satisfying conventional physical models, these theories did provide enough of a bridge between traditional Navajo knowledge and quantum physics to allow for limited practical applications. By 1989, the research had produced several functioning prototypes, including a device that could detect metal fatigue in aircraft components before any visible signs appeared, and another that could temporarily increase the flexibility of metal alloys without heating. These developments, while falling far short of the dramatic effects of Thomas Bigay's rifle, represented significant advances in materials science. Then, In October 1989, the project took an unexpected turn. During a demonstration involving a larger quantity of materials than previously used, Gabriel combined his standard techniques with a new element, a small fragment of meteorite that had been in his family's possession for generations. The result was far more powerful than anticipated. The test chamber, a reinforced concrete room with walls 2 feet thick, experienced what official reports described as a localized spatial distortion. Instruments recorded massive electromagnetic fluctuations. One wall of the chamber developed a perfect circular opening similar to those found in the aircraft downed by Thomas Begay's rifle, except that the material hadn't been penetrated or destroyed. Instead, the concrete had simply ceased to exist in that precise cylindrical volume. It wasn't there, but it also wasn't not there. Dr. Elena Vasquez, a quantum physicist assigned to the project, attempted to explain in her report. Sensors indicated that the space occupied by the missing material registered neither as matter nor as empty space, but as something our instruments couldn't categorize, a region where standard physical properties were suspended or operating under different rules. The incident triggered an immediate security review. While no one had been injured, the implications were profound. The research had moved beyond unusual materials science into something that appeared to affect the fundamental nature of physical space. Colonel Whitehawk, who had been promoted to brigadier general during the course of the project, made a difficult decision. After consultation with his superiors and a long private conversation with Gabriel Begay, he ordered Sky's Stone to Satu classified above top secret and placed under a special access program with fewer than 20 authorized personnel. All practical applications research was suspended, and the focus shifted to pure theoretical understanding, with no attempt to develop technologies. We're dealing with principles that exceed our ethical framework for development, Whitehawk noted in his final project assessment in December 1989. The potential applications, both beneficial and catastrophic, are beyond our current ability to responsibly manage. It is therefore my recommendation that this knowledge be preserved but not applied until such time as we develop the wisdom to match its power. Gabriel Begay returned to the Navajo Nation in early 1990, taking with him his great-uncle's rifle and the private knowledge of what had been discovered. As part of his agreement with the government, he would remain available for consultation but would conduct no further demonstrations. The official files state that he lived quietly on the reservation, occasionally working as a cultural liaison for the tribal government and spending much of his time teaching traditional practices to younger generations. But there are gaps in the surveillance records, periods of months when Gabriel's activities were not monitored. And there are stories, told quietly among certain families in the more remote regions of the Navajo Nation, of an informal school where the old knowledge is still taught to those deemed worthy of receiving it. A place where young men and women learn about the relationships between stone and sky, earth and metal, past and present. The official Sky Stone files were scheduled for declassification in 2035, but in 2007, they were placed under extended classification with a new review date of 2075. The stated reason was ongoing national security implications, though exactly what those implications might be after so many years remains unclear. What is clear, however, is that occasionally reports still filter in from military and commercial pilots flying over the American Southwest. Electronic anomalies, brief radar distortions, and sometimes, in the deep canyons and mesas of the Navajo Nation, they glimpse something that looks like a faint blue light rising into the night sky, a light the color of turquoise, climbing upward before vanishing into the darkness. In 2015, an engineer at Boeing's Advanced Research Center published a paper on a new technique for detecting microscopic stress fractures in aircraft aluminum, a method he credited to insights gained from indigenous materials knowledge of the American Southwest. The paper contained no classified information and made no mention of Sky Stone, but those familiar with the project recognized the underlying principles. And in a secure storage facility somewhere in the Nevada desert, a collection of artifacts from the original Sky Stone research gathers dust. Among them is a sealed container holding turquoise fragments extracted from Thomas Begay's rifle barrel. Fragments that, according to sensor logs checked every 6 months, occasionally emit low-frequency vibrations that match no known natural pattern. Most curious of all, these vibrations intensify whenever aircraft pass overhead. The official stance of the United States military remains that no unconventional weapons were developed or deployed on the Navajo Nation in 1973 or at any time thereafter. The downing of 3 aircraft over Arizona that summer has been permanently classified as a series of unrelated mechanical failures. The existence of projects Sky Stone and Sky Stone Tao 2 is neither confirmed nor denied. Yet the questions persist, whispered among those with the highest security clearances and those who live in the shadow of the sacred mountains of the Dinetah, the traditional Navajo homeland. What was inside that rifle that could call aircraft from the sky? What ancient knowledge did Thomas Begay rediscover? And most unsettling of all, who else might know these secrets now? For those who have glimpsed the true answers, there comes an understanding that transcends conventional science and traditional belief alike, a recognition that the boundaries we draw between different forms of knowledge are as artificial as the boundaries we draw between nations, that perhaps the most dangerous illusion of all is the belief that we have discovered everything there is to know about the world and how it works. In the end, the story of Thomas Begay's rifle offers both warning and promise. It reminds us that power comes in many forms, from many traditions, and that the most profound technologies might not look like technologies at all, to eyes trained to see only what they expect to find. It is said in the high desert of the Southwest that if you listen carefully on still nights when the sky is clear, you can hear the stones singing to the stars, a song of remembrance, of connection, of a time when all things were one. Most dismiss this as simply myth or metaphor. But for those who know the true story of what happened in the summer of 1973, those who have seen what can happen when the right hands reshape the right materials with the right knowledge, the singing of the stones is not just poetry. It is physics we have yet to understand. It is relationship we have forgotten. It is power we must approach with humility. The rifle that brought down 3 planes in 48 hours now rests in a ceremonial bundle in a place known only to a few trusted keepers of knowledge. Its power remains dormant, awakened only for ceremonies of renewal and balance. But the knowledge behind it lives on, passed carefully from teacher to student, protected not by security clearances or concrete vaults, but by the wisdom to know when such power should remain unused. And occasionally, when the need is great and conventional methods have failed, something unusual happens in the high desert. A mechanical problem resolves itself inexplicably. A lost child is found by searchers who report being drawn to the right location. A wildfire changes direction, sparing a community in its path. Small miracles, perhaps, or applications of knowledge so subtle that they leave no evidence beyond their effects. Gabriel Begay passed away in 2012, aged 67. His funeral was attended by family, friends, tribal officials, and, just as at his great-uncle's funeral decades earlier, several unidentified men in military uniforms who spoke to no one and departed immediately after the ceremony. In his personal papers, discovered after his death, was a letter addressed simply to those who will listen. It contained only a few lines, written in a firm, clear hand. The stones still sing, the sky still listens, the metal still remembers. All things remain connected, even when we forget. This knowledge does not belong to any one people or nation. It belongs to the earth and all who will use it with respect. Learn to listen. Remember what we once knew, and understand that the most powerful technology is not technology at all. It is relationship. See, the letter was signed with a simple thumbprint pressed in what laboratory analysis later confirmed to be finely ground turquoise mixed with some unidentifiable substance. The paper itself, though appearing modern, contained mineral traces consistent with materials that had been exposed to the same quantum restructuring observed in the Sky Stone project. And so the mystery remains, neither fully revealed nor completely hidden. A reminder that between heaven and earth, between modern science and ancient wisdom, there exist possibilities we have only begun to comprehend. For those who seek the truth behind the legend of Thomas Begay's rifle, perhaps the most important question is not what was inside it, but what insights were inside the mind of the man who made it. Insights that allowed him to speak to the stones and the metal and the sky in a language they remembered from the beginning of time. A language that, in the right circumstances, with the right intention, they might still answer today. In these troubled times, when technology so often divides us from the natural world and from each other, perhaps there is something valuable to be learned from this story. A reminder that the most profound innovation might not be a new device or material, but a new way of understanding our relationship with the world around us. Or, perhaps, more accurately, an old way, one that we forgot long ago, but that waits patiently to be remembered. As the elders say, the stones are still singing. We need only remember how to listen. May God bless you, and may Jesus Christ guide your path through this world of mysteries, both ancient and new. For in understanding the wonders of creation, we come closer to understanding the Creator, whose patterns and principles are woven through all things, from the smallest turquoise stone to the vast reaches of the star-filled sky. And somewhere in the Four Corners region, a young woman sits with her grandfather, listening to stories of the old ways, learning how to prepare the sacred materials, how to sing the songs that the stones remember. Nearby, wrapped carefully in a ceremonial bundle, an old Winchester Model 70 rests, dormant but not powerless, a bridge between worlds that most of us can no longer see. The knowledge continues, the mystery endures, and overhead, the metal birds still fly through the turquoise sky, unaware of the ancient songs that could call them home.